Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Bonsai Boy, but my friends call me Bon, and today I'd like to talk about a fascinating and thrilling game unlike any other, Pacific Drive. However, before I can get to that, I want to be upfront and say that I was provided a review key for this game by the developer Ironwood Studios and their publisher Kepler Interactive. As some of you may know, this is the first time I've been given access to a review copy of a game, and as exciting as that is, I want to make it incredibly clear that this in no way impacts my thoughts or what I have to say in this video. Generally speaking, if I'm talking about a game on this channel, it's because I enjoyed my time with it and found plenty to love. And that won't change simply to appease cynics or to combat accusations of being a shill. I'm going to talk about the games I enjoy, so naturally any games I'm provided a review copy for and subsequently choose to cover on this channel will in some small way benefit from that. So, with that out of the way, let's hobble back to the garage and talk about Pacific Drive.
Oh, well. You're alive. We're certain if the zone didn't get you, that gateway would.
First things first, what exactly is this game? Well, as you may have gleaned from the title and the bits of footage I've had playing in the background, simply put, Pacific Drive is a game about finding a strange car in an even stranger place. And man oh man, what a strange car it is. Now, jokes aside, Pacific Drive is at its core a survival game, but even calling it that will feel somewhat disingenuous to anyone familiar with the traditional gathering and crafting formula of the genre. But before we get to that, let's talk about what elements of a survival game you can expect to find. So naturally, as just mentioned, the game does have both gathering and crafting, as well as a variety of tools that break down with use. There is also an expansive tech tree, a wide range of equipment and upgrades to unlock, and a hostile environment for the player to explore known as the Olympic Exclusion Zone. The premise is this. In an alternate timeline, this zone appeared in the Pacific Northwest decades ago, bringing with it all sorts of strange anomalies. Fast forward a few decades to the 1990s, and the player character is driving down a winding road just outside the wall separating said place from the outside world. Soon after, your car breaks down mysteriously and you're pulled straight into the Olympic Exclusion Zone as we've talked about. Shortly after, you stumble upon the mysterious station wagon that you'll be growing intimately familiar with over the course of the game, and then you're contacted over the radio by a handful of characters who set the plot in motion. Now, your car is basically the only way of getting around or completing objectives to finish a mission. On top of that, the only way to leave the area is by charging it with these strange objects called anchors and summoning a big pillar of light that you drive into. As you go out on excursions to progress the story and complete missions, you'll gather a variety of materials that can upgrade your car or your base back at the garage. From the garage, you'll upgrade your car, repair it, and refuel it between missions, as well as plan your different missions and scan them for hazards before setting off. Speaking of hazards, that's where the tension and challenge of the gameplay comes in. In the zone, there's a wide range of different anomalies that generally speaking pose a threat to you or your car. While none of them seem to be particularly hostile or sentient, given you're driving a beat-up station wagon, all it takes is an electrical shock, a slight tug in the wrong direction, or being lifted 20 feet in the air for you to have serious cause for concern. And early on, it only takes a couple of close encounters with different anomalies to leave you stuck up shit creek without a paddle. Which is why it's important to get to grips with driving this lovable hunk of junk and fix it up into something more capable. And that brings me to the next section, the car. As mentioned, you'll be introduced to the car shortly after arriving in what the game simply calls the zone. What I found immediately apparent and quite satisfying from the very start was how manual all of the game's mechanics are in relation to driving. For example, when getting into the car you must open the door, get in, turn the key to get it started, and then shift it into drive. These kinds of mechanics also exist outside the car, for example how refueling requires you to actually bring the gas can or pump to the tank and wait for it to fill. I personally love this kind of stuff, and when done well like it is here, this sort of kinetic interaction with the world immediately lends itself to a convincing sense of immersion. Speaking of immersion, the diegetic music and map go a long way to really grounding the player in this world as well. Again, I love these kinds of mechanics for the same reason I love the more manual gameplay. It so effortlessly communicates the atmosphere and feeling of being in a place. But we'll come back to that when we talk about the setting and atmosphere more broadly. As for actually driving the car, I love it. Early on, this thing really is just a piece of shit and you can feel it. Every bump in the road feels like it's going to throw you into a ditch, it both under and over steers, and getting it above 50 feels like a death wish. And as awful as that may sound, by starting at the bottom, you really get a sense for how each improvement to the car changes how you're able to drive through the world. It's also never that bad, and if anything, it's a rather realistic depiction of how it feels to drive a heavy station wagon on bad tires. Ask me how I know. It certainly slides out of control on mud and dirt roads a little easier than you might expect, but then again, I don't imagine many people take their station wagon with summer tires off-roading. Now, like I mentioned earlier, it's how this car improves over time that really makes the game's sense of progression and pacing feel so masterfully executed. As you upgrade the car in various ways with reinforced components, it really starts to come together and feel like a functional and dependable vehicle. That is, until you fail a mission and roll back into the garage with your fixer-upper feeling more like a fixer-downer. Oh, and did I mention that the car is seemingly a sentient machine called a remnant capable of developing strange quirks that you have to diagnose and treat? 'Cause it is, and you do. So what exactly do you do in the Olympic Exclusion Zone with your strange and not-so-trusty steed? Well, would you believe me if I said you did missions not unlike those in Suicide Squad? Yes, I'm still playing it, come at me. Okay, that's a bit of a stretch, but you do travel into a strange place with the goal of gathering resources and have to escape via a big glowing orange portal. I'll get to the details of that in another section, however the truth of what you really do in Pacific Drive is vibe. Like I just said, I'll get to the mission structure and goals in just a bit, but chances are if you've made it this far, it's because this game has caught your attention just like it did mine, and probably for some of the same reasons. If you're looking at this and thinking, damn, yeah that game is a vibe, man you have no idea. Pacific Drive might just be one of the most intensely atmospheric and immersive games I have ever played. I've spent my entire life in the Pacific Northwest, and there are moments in this game that truly capture its beauty and sincerely remind me of a relaxing drive through the rain-soaked mountains. I swear, I can smell the rain in this game. If you know, you know. And then there are moments like this, where I had to stop and catch my breath because my hands were shaking and I felt a palpable sense of dread slowly drifting away. No horror game has ever filled me with the anxiety that racing towards this beacon of salvation on the horizon does, each and every time. Before I can say any more though, I have to stop and give huge props to the sound design team at Ironwood Studios because my god, the soundscape in this game does so much heavy lifting for the atmosphere it's damn near obscene. And that's not to downplay the visuals, and we'll get to them shortly. But every ambient sound, every strange anomaly, every rattle and creak of the car, even the sound of the tires rolling against the pavement, it's all incredible. Like, I don't know if it's just good execution of simple practices or something more at work here, but I cannot overstate how incredible the audio experience of Pacific Drive is. When you're driving down a long and winding highway with the overcast sky and music softly crackling through the radio, it's like I'm driving up to visit my family cabin near North Bend, and I can almost feel the cool breeze on the air and the storm clouds in the distance. The handful of voice actors also delivered great performances and were an awesome addition to the overall narrative and experience as a whole. As for the visual presentation, it's likewise quite impressive. Something to note that I find both cool and charming is that up close, most of the game is very low fidelity and the textures are somewhat flat. However, when paired with the phenomenal use of lighting, this game creates a truly wonderful sense of atmosphere that simply pulls you straight into the world. And on the topic of lighting, this game is not afraid to get dark, and it definitely does a good job of encouraging you to manage your headlights and flares without being overbearing or frustrating. Another element of the visuals worth mentioning has to be the environment itself, which is a lovingly crafted recreation of the Pacific Northwest one moment and an ominous irradiated hellscape the next. Adding to this effect are the various anomalies which are brilliantly vague and unsettling in their depiction. They aren't quite scary as they seem to behave sort of like natural phenomena, and many of them are simply road hazards like spiky goo puddles that will punch holes in your tires, or the big rock pillars that come out of the ground in front of you. But there are freakier ones like the mannequin-looking explosive statues called tourists, which have a habit of moving when you aren't looking, or the big floating robots called abductors, which tether to your car and try to drag you off course and into other hazards. There are also these annoying little bastards called bunnies, which are like sentient balls of irradiated scrap that bounce around and will stick themselves to your car. As for the car itself, it looks great on the inside and out, as well as having a wide range of custom paints and other cosmetics you can find and apply. It's also cool seeing how different types of upgrades change the style of different doors and panels over time, etc. Okay, so I've talked about the car and the zone we use it to explore, but now it's time to talk about what it's like to actually play Pacific Drive. So for starters, the game is broken up into different levels connected along these various routes. Most of the time, you'll enter a level for the first time and have to escape from it by gathering the strange devices I mentioned at the start called anchors. Each one you gather charges your arc device with Klim energy, and once you've gathered enough of them, you can look at your map and activate a gateway to leave. At which point, the zone will start to lose stability, and you must race to the pillar of light that will teleport you safely back to the garage with whatever items and energy you gathered from the anchors. Said energy is used to unlock tech tree upgrades, some of which are essential for progressing the story, but most of which are just about improving the car and garage. After you've successfully extracted from a level the first time, you can then scan the next area ahead of it and pass through the previous level. The different routes will connect to each other at different points, and longer highways provide easier means of getting back to areas you've previously been to or need to pass through. Different zones will also have different hazards and a set of changing modifiers that can make passage particularly difficult, such as having your car suddenly jolt forward with an uncontrollable burst of speed at random. I'll be honest here and say this game isn't easy, and it took me 10 hours just to reach the second major area where I stopped recording at the publisher's request. A single failed mission cost me a ton of resources in the short term. Though you can find the wreckage and retrieve most of your stuff from a failed mission when you go back, it still left me with a much less functional vehicle and had me anxiously repeating the same mission with much less preparation and only a bit more knowledge. The successful end of that mission is what led me to my previously mentioned heart-pounding moment of relief. And for the most part, that's the game. You'll continue doing missions, unraveling the story and mysteries of the zone, and building up your car to take on more and more treacherous environments and anomalies. Pacific Drive is a truly unique experience that resonated with me even more than I expected it would, and delivered on its core premise so successfully that I've considered calling it the first great single-player extraction game. In any case, as a fan of deeply immersive experiences, the Pacific Northwest, and the growing popularity of games with loot extraction mechanics, I can confidently say that Pacific Drive is an amazing game and a shockingly impressive debut from an incredible team. I absolutely cannot wait to see what the talented people at Ironwood Studios try their hand at next, and they can certainly count me among what I imagine will soon be many fans. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ding the little bell if you want to be notified when my next video goes live. I also do variety game streaming 5 days a week starting at 12 PM Pacific Standard Time, which is where I capture my gameplay footage used in these videos and play through the games covered on this channel. Link to my Twitch channel, Discord, and more in the description. Thanks again, and see you next time.